Captain Sarah Chen had seen enough horrors in the Galactic War to last several lifetimes, but nothing had prepared her for what she found in the ruins of Kepler 442b's primary settlement. The smoking wreckage of what had once been a thriving Zorathi colony stretched endlessly before her, the acrid smell of burnt metal and worse things filling her environmental suit's filtered air. The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 3 standard days before her reconnaissance ship, the Mercy's Edge, had picked it up. Command had expected survivors, maybe a few dozen Zorathi civilians caught in the crossfire between human and hegemony forces. What they hadn't expected was silence, the kind that spoke of complete annihilation. Sarah picked her way through the debris, her scanner sweeping for any signs of life. The Zorathi were proud, wolf-like beings who valued strength and pack bonds above all else. Their settlements were usually organized around family clusters, with the strongest leading and the weak protected. But here, there was nothing but death. That's when she heard it. A soft whimpering coming from beneath a collapsed building's foundation. Her heart rate spiked as she followed the sound, using her suit's enhanced strength to move aside chunks of concrete and twisted metal. The whimpering grew louder, more desperate. Finally, her headlamp illuminated a small space where part of the building structure had created a protective pocket. Huddled together were 6 Zorathi cubs, their gray fur matted with dust and dried blood. The oldest couldn't have been more than 5 standard years, the youngest barely weaned. Their golden eyes, so much like earth wolves, stared at her with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. "Jesus," Sarah whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The cubs pressed closer together. The oldest, a female with distinctive white markings around her muzzle, positioning herself protectively in front of the others. She bared tiny fangs and growled, a sound more pitiful than threatening. Sarah slowly removed her helmet, knowing the atmosphere was breathable for both species. "Hey there, little ones," she said softly, her voice deliberately calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." The cubs' ears twitched at the unfamiliar sounds of human speech, but something in Sarah's tone seemed to reach them. The protective female's growl faded to an uncertain whine. Over the next hour, Sarah coaxed them from their hiding spot with emergency rations and gentle patience. None of them spoke yet, too young for the universal translators to fully interpret their meaning beyond basic emotional context. But she could read their body language, lost, scared, and completely alone. As she gathered them into her ship's medical bay, Sarah's communications array crackled to life. "Captain Chen, this is Admiral Morrison. What's your status on Kepler 442b, Sarah?" Looked at the 6 cubs now huddled together on the medical platform, while her ship's AI ran preliminary health scans. "Colony is completely destroyed, sir. No adult survivors detected." "Any salvageable intelligence?" "Negative, sir, but I do have 6 Zorathi cubs, all under combat age, requesting permission to transport them to New Geneva Station for processing." There was a long pause. "Captain, those are enemy nationals. Protocol dictates at their children, sir." Sarah's voice hardened. "Orphaned children who've lost everything. I'm not leaving them here to die." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood. Captain, transport them to the station, but they'll need to be processed through enemy civilian protocols." Sarah ended the transmission and looked back at the cubs. The smallest one, a male with one torn ear, had fallen asleep against her leg. The protective female still watched her warily, but her posture had relaxed. The journey to New Geneva Station took 4 days. During that time, Sarah found herself becoming something she'd never expected, a pack leader to 6 alien children. She learned their individual personalities: Kira, the protective eldest; Ven, the curious one who tried to explore every inch of the ship; Sasha, who cried for her mother every night; the twins Locke and Luke, inseparable even in sleep; and little Pip, who had attached himself to Sarah's side and refused to leave. She taught them basic human words, showed them how to use the ship's facilities, and slowly, carefully began to heal their trauma with patience and unconditional care. In return, they taught her about pack bonds, how they instinctively cared for each other, how they shared food and warmth, how they faced danger as one unit. When they arrived at New Geneva Station, Sarah faced an uncomfortable reality. The enemy. Civilian protocols meant the cubs would be separated, processed individually, and likely placed in detention facilities designed for adult prisoners. The thought made her stomach turn. "I'm applying for emergency guardianship," she told the station commander, a gruff man named Patterson who'd known her for 5 years. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "Sarah, they're Zorathi, enemy combatants. They're children, and they trust me." She gestured to where the cubs waited in the docking bay, Pip still clinging to her leg while the others formed a protective circle around them both. "Look at them, Tom. They've bonded with me. Separating them now would be cruel." Patterson studied the small group, noting how they positioned themselves defensively, how they looked to Sarah for guidance, how she unconsciously moved to shield them from his scrutiny. "The paperwork alone will be a nightmare," he muttered. "I'll handle the paperwork. The review boards won't like it. I'll face the review boards. Command will think you've lost your mind. Let them." Sarah's voice was steady, certain. "Tom, I've spent 3 years of this war taking lives. Let me save some for once." Patterson was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I'll approve the emergency guardianship, but Sarah, you know this changes everything, right? Your career, your life, everything." Sarah looked down at Pip, who was making soft chirping sounds of contentment against her leg, then at the 5 other pairs of golden eyes watching her with complete trust. For the first time in years, she felt something other than emptiness in her chest. "Yeah," she said softly. "I know." As the paperwork was processed and their new life began, Sarah understood something profound about humanity that no military manual had ever taught her. Sometimes strength wasn't about superior firepower or tactical brilliance. Sometimes it was about opening your heart to the lost and broken, about becoming the shelter they needed when their whole world had collapsed. The cubs had no pack to call home, so she became their everything. And in doing so, she discovered that she had found her pack too.